The void near the star, designated as K7b, was anything but empty. It teemed with the silent, glinting shapes of the Threxian Armada. Hundreds of ships, from sleek dagger-like frigates to massive, city-block-sized dreadnoughts, moved with a chilling, synchronized purpose. Their hulls, a non-reflective black that drank the distant starlight, were marked with the angular, harsh script of the Threxian hegemony. For 300 years, this armada had been the final word in any conflict. Planets surrendered at its approach. Civilizations bargained for mercy before the first shot was fired. Today, its target was the human colony on the third planet of the system, a stubborn outpost that had refused all reasonable demands for subjugation. On the command bridge of the flagship, the Void's Will, Admiral Kale observed the tactical displays. His form was tall and insectoid, encased in a command carapace that clicked softly with every minor adjustment. 4 multifaceted eyes gleamed under the low light, reflecting the streams of data. All signs were optimal. The human outer defensive platforms were debris. Their patrol ships were gone, tracked and eliminated weeks ago. The colony below was a soft, undefended fruit, ready to be plucked to demonstrate the futility of resistance. Final sensor sweep confirms no active threats in the engagement zone. "Admiral," said the voice from his side. It belonged to Li Na. She was human, a fact that made several of the Threxian bridge officers subtly angle their bodies away from her station. Her value was her knowledge, traded for a promised place in the new order. She wore a tailored version of the Threxian uniform, a stark contrast to the organic armor of her companions. Her eyes were fixed on her own screen, confirming the emptiness. All human military signatures have been erased. The path is clear. Admiral Kale let a low hum of satisfaction vibrate in his thorax. Then we proceed to final approach. Signal the claw of submission and the silent judge to take point. A main fleet will hold position here. We will give the humans one final chance to transmit their surrender before we make an example. The orders flowed through the fleet network, a digital chorus of acknowledgement. The Armada began its stately, terrifying dance, shifting from a travel formation into a broad, overlapping sphere of dominance around the colony planet. It was a display meant to be seen, meant to crush hope from orbit. It was at the perfect moment of their supreme confidence that the anomaly occurred. A single, faint ping echoed through the sophisticated sensor web of the Void's Will. It was a ghost of a signal. Appearing in a sensor-blind spot of volumetric gap between long-range scanners and close-in proximity fields that was considered impossible to occupy without detection. For a millisecond, it was logged as a glitch, a piece of cosmic debris reflecting a stray bit of starlight. Then it pinged again. Stronger. Li Na's head snapped up. "Admiral." "A contact. Bearing 027. Ecliptic relative. Extreme close range." Kale's claws tightened on the rail before him. "Classification?" "Scanning. It's small. A frigate analog. Power signatures are minimal, running silent except for a basic navigational beacon." She paused, her brow furrowing. "Its profile. Its human design. Old, pre-conflict era hull pattern." A ripple of disdain moved through the bridge. A lost, ancient human ship stumbled into the jaws of the beast. It was almost amusing. "A derelict," dismissed Kale. "Perhaps a forgotten patrol ship. Target it with a tertiary battery and remove it. Do not let it clutter our field of fire." As the weapons officer complied, Li Na's console chimed a different, sharper alert. Her blood ran cold. "Admiral, wait. The transponder. It's activating." Before Kale could respond, the identity packet from the lone ship broadcast across all standard and encrypted frequencies. It was simple, clean, and devastatingly clear. Vessel identification. Unyielding. Registry. Terran Sovereign Navy. Status. Active. Duty. The name meant nothing to the younger Threxians. But on the command bridge, and across the older ships of the Armada, a silence fell that was deeper than the vacuum outside. On the bridge of the Unyielding, the atmosphere was one of focused calm. The lighting was soft, illuminating surfaces that were worn but meticulously maintained. This was not the sterile, glowing command center of a Threxian warship. This was a place that felt lived in. A machine with a soul. Captain Kim Jun stood at the central command podium, his hands resting lightly on the edges. He was a man in his late 40s, with a quiet steadiness in his eyes that spoke of storms weathered. He watched the main viewer, which displayed a tactical overlay of the colossal Threxian Armada. It looked like a cloud of steel hornets surrounding their single, solitary ship. Transponder broadcast confirmed, Captain, said First Officer Park Sumai from her station to his right. Her voice was even analytical. She monitored the flood of data from the enemy fleet, their power surges, their weapon activations, the sudden, chaotic chatter on their comms. They've taken the bait. Reading multiple targeting locks. All low-yield, point defense grade. They think we're a ghost, June said, a faint, hard smile touching his lips. Or a malfunction. From the engineering station to the rear, Lee Dae-hyun called out. His fingers danced over a console that looked like it had been upgraded a dozen times. Wires and conduits snaking into open panels. Shield capacitors at 100%. Kinetic dispersal grid is primed. They can poke us all they want, Captain. It'll just be a light show. At the communications station, Choi Hai-jin listened to the cacophony of Threxian signals. She wore a headset, her expression one of intense concentration as she filtered the panic from the professionalism. I'm picking up the name being repeated across their command channels. Lower decks are... They're asking questions. There's confusion. Medic Kang Min-soo stood near the rear entrance, his med kit already open on a secondary console. He wasn't needed for medical duty yet. In a ship this small, everyone had multiple roles. His current job was monitoring crew biometrics. All readings nominal. No stress spikes. He said it with a hint of pride. They were all afraid, of course. But it was a fear they had learned to hold in their hands, like a tool. June nodded. Good, Hai-jin. Begin stage 1. Broadcast the Helios black box feed on all frequencies they used for their surrender ultimatum. Dae-hyun, keep our posture passive. No aggressive moves. Sumai, the moment the capital ship shifts to main battery, you tell me. The order was acknowledged. On the screen, a tiny, focused energy beam lanced out from a Threxian frigate. It struck the Unyielding's forward shield, rippling across the energy barrier in a splash of harmless light. The human ship didn't fire back. It didn't alter course. It simply hung in space, a silent, ancient sentinel. On the Void's will, the mood had shattered. Admiral Kale stared at the visual of the human ship, soaking up the puny attack without a scratch. Why does it not respond? Why does it not die? He hissed. Lai Na was frantically pulling data from the historical archives, her face pale. Admiral, Unyielding. It's not just a name. It's a whole designation from the Battle of Helios Nexus. Helios. The word acted like a physical blow on the bridge. The few older Threxian officers' present stiffened, their mandibles clicking in distress. Helios was a tragedy. An anomaly, Kale stated, but his voice lacked its former certainty. The ship at Helios, Lena continued, her voice dropping to a whisper the whole bridge strained to hear, was a third-rate human cruiser, outgunned 100-1. Its tactic was not to fight the fleet, but to use a calculated FTL jump into the heart of the dreadnought Eternal Conquest. She looked up, meeting Kale's gaze. They destroyed our flagship by turning themselves into a bullet. That ship's name was Unyielding. The legend, the horror story told to young Threxian warriors about the mad, sacrificial humans, was now floating before them. It was supposed to be destroyed. It was a story. But stories, when they become real, are the most terrifying things of all. Admiral Kale watched as the human ship began broadcasting old, grainy sensor logs. He saw the familiar, dreaded silhouette of the Eternal Conquest. He saw the small, brave, stupid human ship lighting its engines for a jump it could not survive. A cold dread, a feeling entirely foreign to a conqueror, began to uncoil in his gut. The Armada's perfect formation seemed to tremble. The panic had not yet erupted into flight, but it was born. It whispered through the comms, in the hesitation of weapons officers, in the sudden, urgent queries flooding the fleet command net. The Threxian Armada had come to deliver fear. They had not expected to receive it first, from a single silent ship with a name from a nightmare. The silence on the bridge of the Void's will was thick and heavy. It was not the quiet of focus, but the quiet of a breath held too long. The main viewer displayed the lone human ship, the Unyielding, hanging in the void like a dark, motionless bird of prey. The harmless splash of light from the frigate's test shot had faded, leaving no mark. Admiral Kale forced his primary claws to unclench from the command rail. The smooth, polished bone of the rail was now etched with fine scratches. He could feel the eyes of his bridge crew upon him, waiting for the order that would shatter this strange, unsettling pause. The name Unyielding echoed in his mind, a discordant note against the symphony of his certain victory. "Full spectrum scan," Kale commanded, his voice a low, buzzing rasp. "I want every particle of that ship analyzed. Its power source, its weapon signatures, its crew complement. Now." Across the bridge, Threxian officers bent to their tasks, their multiple limbs moving with a haste that bordered on panic. Sensor beams, visible as faint ripples in space, washed over the human vessel. Data began to stream across secondary screens. Lei Na watched the results flood her own console. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The readings were wrong. All wrong. "Admiral," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "The scan is confused. The hull composition matches pre-FTL human alloys. Titanium steel composites. It reads as a museum piece. But the power signature, it's diffuse. It's not coming from a central reactor. It's like the entire ship is a capacitor, holding a charge we can't quantify." "Impossible," hissed Kale. "A ship cannot function without a core. It is a ghost. A projection." "Maybe not a ghost," Lina whispered, more to herself. She pulled up the old, fragmented files from the Battle of Helios Nexus. The reports were classified, sanitized, but the trauma was buried in the data. The original Unyielding, before its final jump, its power readings were also anomalous. The theory was they bypassed all safety protocols, channeling everything life support, gravity, communications into a single massive spatial distortion drive. They turned their whole ship into a bomb. Before Kale could respond, the communications officer stiffened. "Admiral," incoming broadcast from the human vessel. It's not a message. It's data. Video files." "On screen," Kale ordered. The main viewer shifted. The image of the Unyielding was replaced by a grainy, jerking video feed. The quality was poor, the colors washed out. It was from an external camera on a Threxian vessel. The iconic, menacing shape of the dreadnought Eternal Conquest filled the frame, its weapon ports glowing with lethal energy. Then, a small, boxy human cruiser, identified by a flickering tag as TSN Unyielding, turned towards it. Its engines flared, not with the blue of standard thrust, but with a strange, wrong, purplish-white glare. The video jumped, static washing through it, and then showed the impossible. The human ship vanishing not into a jump point, but into a localized tier in reality, appearing instantly halfway through the hull of the Eternal Conquest. The screen filled with silent, explosive light, and then went black dot. It was the Threxian black box recording from Helios. The humans were broadcasting the Threxians' own worst memory back to them. A low, subsonic groan echoed through the deck plates of the Void's will. It was not a mechanical sound. It came from the older Threxian crew, a visceral sound of recognition and dread. On the command podium, Admiral Kale felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. This was not a military tactic. This was psychological warfare of a kind the Threxians, for all their might, had never conceived. They broke planets, not spirits. Shut it down. He roared, jam that signal. All channels. But it was too late. The broadcast was not just on one frequency. It was a flood, using every civilian, military, and emergency band the Threxians themselves used. It was in their ears, on their screens, in their secure tactical networks. The image of their greatest historical defeat, long suppressed, was now playing on a loop for the entire Armada to see. On the bridge of the Unyielding, the mood remained a stark contrast to the chaos they were sowing. Captain Kim Jun watched the tactical overlay. Dozens of Threxian ships were now showing erratic power fluctuations. Their neat formation was beginning to blur, like ink dropped in water. "They're scared," First Officer Park Sumi said, her voice calm. She tracked 3 frigates that had slowly, almost imperceptibly, begun to drift backwards, increasing their distance from the Unyielding. The Helios footage is having a pronounced effect on vessels with command crews whose service records indicate prior combat experience against human forces. "Fear is a seed," June replied, his eyes never leaving the screen. "It just needs the right soil to grow." Haijin, status on their communications? Choi Haijin listened, a small, cold smile on her lips. "Chaotic, Captain. Their command network is flooded with requests for orders, requests for confirmation, demands to know if it's a trick. The lower deck chatter is pure panic. They're calling it the Ghost of Helios." Engineer Lee Dae-hyun called out from his station. "Captain, the big one, the dreadnought directly ahead. The Claw of Submission is powering up its primary forward battery." "That's not a warning shot. That's a kill shot." June nodded. This was the critical moment. "Sumi, you have the sequence ready?" "Ready, Captain," she confirmed, her hands poised over her console. "On your mark. Min-Soo, crew status?" June asked. Medic Kong Min-Soo checked his biomonitors. Heart rates are elevated but steady. Breathing controlled. "They're ready, Captain." June took a slow breath. He looked at the worn metal of his ship's bulkheads, at the faces of his crew. They were volunteers, all of them. Archivists, engineers, historians, and a few old soldiers. They were not the Navy's best. They were its memory. "Do it," he said. On the Void's will, Admiral Kale saw the Claw of Submission preparing to fire. A wave of relief washed over him. Good. Crush this phantom. End this nonsense. His moment of relief was shattered by a new alert. "Admiral, the human ship, it's changing." On the viewer, the Unyielding was suddenly illuminated from within. A lattice of brilliant white light glowed through its hull plates, tracing along its frame. It made the old ship look like a skeletal ghost, a blueprint drawn in fire against the dark. It was not a weapon powering up. It was an identifier. Then it began to move dot. It didn't turn or bank like a normal ship. It pivoted perfectly, as if fixed to a point in space. It aligned its long axis directly with the center of the Threxian formation, with the Void's will itself. At the same time, a new singular signal pulsed from it. a simple repeating audio tone on every frequency. It was the sound of an ancient human alarm, a harsh, clanging bell, the kind used on ships centuries ago to signal collision or catastrophe to the Threxians. It was a sound without context, and therefore infinitely more terrifying. It was the scream of the machine. What is it doing? What is that signal? Cale demanded, the chill in his gut turning to ice. Lena understood first. Her face went ashen. It's not a signal. It's a countdown. It's the same auditory cue, the first unyielding broadcast on an open channel before it jumped at Helios. It's the last sound the Eternal Conquest ever heard. Panic, held back by discipline and disbelief, finally broke its dam on the Threxian bridge. An officer at the navigation console shouted, "It's going to jump. It's going to ram us. Evasive action. All ships, scatter." Cale bellowed, the order driven by pure instinct. The effect on the Armada was instantaneous and catastrophic. The perfect sphere of dominance collapsed into a swirling chaos of light and motion. Frigates veered into the paths of cruisers. A supply ship, caught in the panic of a nearby destroyer, was clipped and sent spinning, its hull breached. The claw of submission, in the middle of firing its main gun, was forced to abort and swerve violently to avoid a cluster of fleeing fighters. Its immense shot lancing harmlessly into empty space. The Unyielding had not moved an inch from its position. It simply hung there, its skeletal lights blazing, its horrible bell clanging through the void. It had not fired a single weapon. Admiral Cale stared at the viewer, at the chaos of his own magnificent Armada. They were not battling an enemy. They were fleeing a ghost, a story given flesh and steel. The human ship had not attacked their shields or their hulls. It had attacked their courage and found it hollow. A profound, shameful fury rose in him, but beneath it was something worse, the dawning, humiliating realization that he had already lost. The clanging bell from the Unyielding cut off as suddenly as it had begun. The skeletal glow within its hull faded, leaving it once again a dark, silent shape against the starfield. But the damage was done. The Threxian Armada was a wounded beast, thrashing in the void. On the command channel, voices overlapped in a chorus of alarm and confusion. Was a feint. It didn't jump. Formation Delta is shattered. The silent judge reports collisions. My engines are offline. I have no control. Admiral Cale stood amidst the chaos on his own bridge, his multifaceted eyes taking in the disaster on the tactical screens. Ships were scattered, their elegant formation replaced by a tangled mess of vectors. The claw of submission was still struggling to regain its bearing after its violent evasive maneuver. The single oldest human warship in the sector had broken the will of his fleet without firing a shot. Silence. Cale's voice was a sonic crack that vibrated through the bridge. The chatter ceased. He turned his gaze to Lena, who was frantically trying to re-establish some semblance of order on the datanet. The human ship. What is it doing now? What is its power status? Lena wiped a sheen of sweat from her brow. It is holding position, Admiral. Power readings have returned to their previous minimal, diffuse state. No weapon energy signatures. No engine heat. She looked up, her expression one of dawning horror. It's just waiting. It's watching us. The idea was somehow worse than an attack. It meant the humans were not panicked. They were in control. They had executed a maneuver, predicted the Threxian reaction with perfect accuracy, and were now observing the results. Cale felt a species of rage. He had never known a rage born of humiliation. He was being studied like an insect under a glass. This ends now, he buzzed, his mandibles clicking with fury. We are not children to be frightened by shadows. Signal the claw of submission and the silent judge. They are to flank the human vessel and hit it with synchronized fire from their primary particle lances. Full power. We will vaporize this relic and restore order. The orders went out. On the screens, the two massive Threxian dreadnoughts, each 5 times the size of the Unyielding, began to move. They were shaken, but still lethal, their commanders no doubt eager to erase the shame of their panic. They positioned themselves on either side of the human ship, a classic pincer maneuver. The air on the Void's will grew tense with anticipation. This time, there would be no trick, only overwhelming force. On the bridge of the Unyielding, the mood shifted from calm readiness to intense focus. 2 dreadnoughts moving to flanking positions. Park Soo-mi announced, her voice clipped. They are charging primary energy weapons. Particle lances. Yield is sufficient to disintegrate our mass 10 times over. Captain Kim Jun nodded slowly. He had expected this. The initial panic would not last. A cornered enemy, once it got over its shock, would always lash out. The trick was to guide that lash, to make it useless. Dae-Hyon, Jun said. The dispersal grid. Can it handle a simultaneous strike from 2 vectors? At his engineering station, Lee Dae-Hyon was running calculations, his eyes darting across streams of numbers. The grid can handle the energy, Captain. But the harmonic load, if they fire perfectly in sync, it will strain the emitters on the port and starboard sides. We might get some bleed through. Minor hull heating, maybe some internal systems flicker. Understood, Jun said. He turned to his first officer. Sumi, give me a 3-second count before their weapons reach peak charge. Hi, Jin. The moment we are hit, I want you to broadcast on the frequency they are using for their weapon coordination. Feed them the second Helios packet. Choi Hai-jin's fingers were already hovering over her console. The cockpit audio from the Eternal Conquest, Captain. Ready. Medic Kang Min-soo moved to secure a loose panel near his station. He gave Jun a tight, grim smile. Just another day at the office, Captain. Jun allowed himself a small breath. Let's hope so. On the viewer, the 2 Threxian dreadnoughts were like monstrous jaws about to close. Their forward sections glowed with a building, malevolent purple light. Weapons at 90%. 95. Sumi counted down, her voice steady. 100%. They are firing. 2 beams of concentrated destruction, each thicker than the Unyielding itself, lanced across space. They struck the human ship simultaneously from opposite sides. For a terrifying moment, the Unyielding was completely engulfed in a cocoon of violent purple energy. On the Void's will, a savage hope surged through Admiral Kale. He leaned forward, expecting to see the ancient hull vaporize, to see the ghost finally laid to rest, but the energy did not explode outwards. Instead, it seemed to cling to the human ship's hull, swirling and crackling. Then it began to fade, not as an explosion, but as if it were being absorbed, siphoned away into the ship's very skin. The Unyielding emerged from the light show utterly unscathed. No scorch marks, no debris. It was as if the 2 most powerful weapons in the local Threxian fleet had been nothing more than a gentle shower of light, before the stunned silence could break on the Threxian bridges. A new audio feed blasted across their weapon coordination channel. It was not the clean digital signal of a standard transmission. It was full of static, distortion, and primal terror. That it was the final seconds from the bridge of the Eternal Conquest. The Threxian listeners heard the shouts of their own kind, voices twisted by fear. They heard the alarm klaxons, the cracking of support structures, the desperate, buzzing cry of the Conquest's captain. It's inside us. The human ship is inside the hull. Brace for... The audio terminated in a scream of tearing metal and a final digital screech, then silence. This was not a historical recording from a distance. This was the sound of dying Threxians. This was the inside of the tomb. The effect was instantaneous and visceral. On the claw of submission, the weapons officer, a veteran of border skirmishes, froze. He had lost his brood sibling at Helios. The scream on the audio was a sound he heard in his dreams. His claw slipped on the firing control. On the silent judge, the commanding officer, who had seconds ago been filled with vengeful fury, felt a cold paralysis seize his limbs. The audio made the legend real in a way visuals never could. It was the sound of inevitability. Neither ship fired a second shot. Back on the Unyielding, the bridge lights flickered once and stabilized. A low hum from the deck plates slowly faded. Dispersal grid held at 97% efficiency. Lee Dae-Hyon reported, letting out a long breath. Port side emitter 3 is overheating. I'm routing power around it. No damage. No casualties. Kang Min-soo confirmed. Checking his medical monitors, Choi Hai-jin looked up. The audio is playing on a loop on their tactical band. They have stopped talking. Captain Kim Jun watched the tactical screen. The two dreadnoughts hung motionless, their weapon ports dark. The chaotic movement of the rest of the fleet had slowed, as if the entire Armada was holding its breath, listening to the ghosts of Helios scream. They've stopped fighting, Park Sumi observed quietly. No, June corrected, his voice low. They haven't stopped fighting. They've just started remembering what losing feels like. And they're realizing that this ship, right here, is the reason they have that memory. He straightened up. Now, we give them a new one. Hygiene, open a channel. Broad spectrum. Voice only. The Threxian Armada, from the mightiest dreadnought to the smallest fighter, heard a new sound. A calm, human voice, speaking in clear, basic Threxian command dialect. This is Captain Kim Jun of the Terran sovereign vessel Unyielding. You have tested our defense. You have heard your history. There was a pause, long enough for the weight of those words to settle. The next transmission will be your surrender. You have 1 hour to decide. The channel closed. On the Void's will, Admiral Kale sank back into his command perch, the fight draining out of him. He was not looking at the view screen anymore. He was staring at the faces of his crew. He saw the fear, not of death, but of helplessness. They could pour all the fire in the galaxy onto that ship, and it would just listen. And then it would answer with the sound of their ancestors dying. The human ship wasn't a warship. It was a judgment. And for the first time in 300 years, the Threxian Armada stood condemned. The silence that followed Captain Kim Jun's ultimatum was heavier than the void outside. On the bridges of 100 Threxian ships, the only sounds were the low hum of life support and the frantic, whispered clicks of mandibles. The clock was now ticking in every mind. Admiral Kale sat motionless in his command perch. The human voice still echoed in his carapace, not loud, but impossibly clear. 1 hour. It was not a demand born of rage or desperation. It was a statement of fact, as calm as a scientist noting an experiment's result. That calm was more terrifying than any scream of defiance. He looked at his tactical screens. The claw of submission and the silent judge still hung dead in space near the human ship, their weapon arrays dark, like beasts that had been struck between the eyes. The rest of his armada was a scattered, disorganized mess. The will to fight had not just been broken. It had been surgically removed. Admiral. The voice was Lee Na's. It was hollow. We are receiving petitions from 7 squadron commanders. They are requesting permission to withdraw to a defensive perimeter. They cite system instability and crew morale. Kale knew what that meant. It meant they wanted to run. The great Threxian Armada, the hammer of the hegemony, wanted to flee from a single ancient ship. A burning shame fought with cold logic in his mind. To retreat was unthinkable. It would shatter the myth of Threxian invincibility forever. But to attack again, he had seen what happened. The human ship absorbed their fury and answered with ghosts. It was a fight they did not know how to win. Denied, Kale said, the word tasting like ash. No ship is to move from its current position without my direct order. We will not give them the spectacle of our retreat. He turned his head, his multifaceted eyes focusing on Li Na. You know these humans. What is their purpose? Why do they not simply destroy us if they can? Li Na stared at her console, at the simple, stark icon representing the unyielding. I don't think destruction is the point, Admiral, she said slowly. At Helios, they sacrificed one ship to destroy one dreadnought. A tactical trade. This is different. They haven't fired a single shot. They are using the idea of Helios as a weapon. They don't want to kill our ships. They want to kill our certainty. Before Kale could respond, a new alert chimed, soft and insistent. It was from the long-range sensor array. Admiral, a sensor officer reported, confusion in his buzz. We are detecting a new energy signature. It is coming from the human colony planet. On the main viewer, a secondary screen lit up. It showed the blue-green curve of the colony world. From its surface, in a dozen different locations, thin beams of light lanced up into space. They were not weapons fire. They were coherent signal lasers, tight and focused. And every single one of them was aimed at the Threxian fleet. What is this? Kale demanded. Are they attempting a pathetic counterattack? Li Na analyzed the data, her confusion deepening. No, the beams carry no destructive energy. They are pure data streams. They are targeting our ship's primary sensor clusters and external communication arrays. They are sending us something. Block it. Jam it. We cannot, Admiral. The signals are on 1,000 different frequencies, using a modulation we do not recognize. They are bypassing our jamming protocols. The data is being received. Across the Armada, on every ship's bridge, new images began to flash on auxiliary monitors. They were not the grainy, historical horrors of Helios. These were clear, sharp, and utterly mundane. A Threxian weapons officer on the Silent Judge saw a video of a human child on the colony below, laughing as she was lifted onto the shoulders of a parent. The sky behind them was a peaceful orange sunset, not the fiery red of bombardment data. Helmsman on a frigate saw a slow pan across a thriving human market, full of colors and sounds, with Threxian cargo vessels, civilian traders, not warships docked peacefully in the background. Not an engineer, deep in the bowels of the claw of submission, watched a simple ceremony. Humans and a few Threxian diplomats exchanging signed tablets under a joint flag. A treaty of mutual trade from years before the war. The video showed gardens, schools, concerts, Threxian and human scientists working side by side in labs. They showed life. Normal, boring, precious life. The life that existed on the other side of a targeting RETICL, E. It was a panoramic, devastating portrait of what they had come to destroy. Not a military target, but a living world. Not faceless enemies, but people. The contrast with the screaming audio from the Eternal Conquest was absolute, and it shattered the remaining narrative of a righteous war. On the unyielding, Choi Hai-jin monitored the data flow with quiet satisfaction. The colony is broadcasting the portrait packets as planned, Captain. Every ship in the fleet is receiving them. The feed is uninterrupted. Captain Kim Jun watched the main tactical display. The icons of the Threxian ships were no longer just showing erratic power readings. Their status indicators were blinking with a new code. Comms overload, psychological profile dissonance. It was a flag Sumi had programmed to mark. The exact moment an enemy's will to fight truly broke, They are seeing what they came to burn. Park Sumi said softly, "It is harder to hate a face than a flag. It is harder to pull a trigger when you see the child who will die." Kang Min Soo added from his station, his usual clinical tone absent. He had helped compile those medical aid videos himself. Lee Dae-hyun looked up from his engineering console, his face serious. "Captain, the dreadnought directly ahead, the Void's will, is powering its main engines. Not for attack. It's a slow burn. They're turning." On the screen, the massive shape of the Threxian flagship began a slow, ponderous rotation. It was not bringing its weapons to bear. It was turning its side to the unyielding, a universal sign of a ship standing down, presenting a less threatening profile. Across the fleet, other ships began to mimic the gesture, like a field of dark flowers turning away from the sun. "They're surrendering?" Hai-jin asked, hope in her voice. "Not yet," Jun said, his eyes narrowed. "It's a gesture of confusion. They don't know what to do. The Admiral is trying to buy time, to think. He needs a push." He made a decision. "Sumi, power up the primary kinetic launch tube. Single round. Standard shell, no warhead. Target the space 1 kilometer off the Void's will's bow. Give them a trajectory they can't miss. A kinetic round. But Captain, our dispersal grid is our strength." "A single shot?" Dae-hyun began. "Is something they understand," Jun finished. "They don't understand our shields. They don't understand our ghosts. But they understand a gun firing. Make it the oldest, simplest gun we have. Fire when ready." On the Unyielding's forward hull, a sealed bay door slid open. A magnetic rail, polished and ancient, extended. With a percussive thump that vibrated through the human ship's frame, a solid tungsten slug the size of a ground car was launched into space. It was a weapon from a bygone era, simple, unguided, and brutally physical. On the Void's will, alarms shrieked as the sudden, primitive launch was detected. Incoming projectile. High-velocity kinetic. The tactical officer screamed. Admiral Kale's eyes snapped to the tracker. He saw the blunt, stupid object racing toward his ship. No energy signature. No guidance locks. Just mass and speed. It was an insult. It was also, in that moment, the most real and understandable threat he had faced in the last hour. Every defensive instinct fired. "Evasive?" He began to shout, but it was too late for that. The slug was not aimed at his hull. It shot past his ship's bow, missing by the exact kilometer Jun had ordered. The wake of its passage rattled the flagship's superstructure, a physical tremor they could all feel. Then the Unyielding transmitted a single final data packet. It contained only two things: the firing solution for the kinetic round, showing its precise, non-lethal targeting, and a still image. The image was from the colony feed. It was a close-up of a Threxian merchant, his facial plates arranged in a peaceful, non-aggressive expression, sharing a meal with a human family. The message was clear. We could have hit you. We did not. This is what we are protecting. Admiral Kale looked from the image on his screen to the receding blur of the kinetic slug, now vanishing into the darkness. He looked at the faces of his crew, who had just flinched from a primitive bullet while being shown a picture of peace. The last of his resolve crumbled. The human ship was not just powerful or clever. It was in complete control of the battle, of the narrative, of him. He opened the fleet-wide channel. His voice, when it came, was drained of all its former power, a dry rustle. All vessels. This is Admiral Kale. Cease all hostile actions. Power down primary weapon systems. Hold your positions. He took a shuddering breath, the most difficult order of his life caught in his throat. We will. Await their terms. The Threxian Armada, the embodiment of fear for 100 worlds, went silent and dark. They waited. The panic was over. Now there was only the heavy, shameful quiet of defeat, delivered by a ghost ship and the memories of a shared meal. The Threxian Armada hung in the void, a garden of dark metal sculptures. Running lights glowed a dim, subdued blue across the fleet, the universal signal for a vessel standing down. The aggressive hum of charged weapons and active targeting systems was gone, replaced by the low background whisper of life support and idle engines. On the bridge of the void's will, Admiral Kale felt the silence like a physical weight. He had given the order. The shame of it was a cold stone in his gut, but the alternative watching his mighty fleet unravel further under the psychological assault was unthinkable. A new signal arrived, not as a broadcast, but as a tight, directed laser-coms beam to his flagship alone. It was a request for a secure two-way audio channel. The sender was the unyielding. Kale accepted without a word. He owed the human commander that much. Admiral Kale. The voice was the same as before. Captain Kim Jun, calm, devoid of mockery or triumph. Your compliance is noted. You will order your fleet to initiate a synchronized jump to coordinates we are transmitting. The destination is a neutral staging area 3 light years forward, where hegemony supply vessels can rendezvous with you. Your weapon systems will remain inactive until you are met by your own people. Kale's mandibles tightened. A prescribed retreat. It was a formal, documented loss. And the colony? He managed to ask. The colony was never your objective, June replied, and there was a slight shift in his tone, something harder. Your objective was to prove you could still make us fear you. You failed. You will leave this system, and you will not return. This incident will be recorded by both our peoples as a navigational misunderstanding, a joint exercise that escalated. The details will be worked out by diplomats. Kale understood. The humans were offering a way out, a story to save face. The Threxian hegemony would not have to admit a fleet was broken by one ship. They would call it a tactical recalibration. The humiliation would be private, but absolute. He had no leverage to refuse. The coordinates, he said finally, the words tasting bitter. Transmitting now. You had 6 hours to complete the jump sequence. Unyielding out. The channel closed. Kale stared at the coordinates on his screen, a point in empty, useless space. He began issuing the orders, his voice a monotone. Around him, his bridge crew moved with a stunned, mechanical obedience. The great war machine was being packed away, not with a bang, but with a whisper. On the unyielding, the tension bled away, replaced by a profound, weary relief. The main viewer now showed the Threxian fleet beginning its slow, coordinated turn toward their jump point. They're going, Park Sumi said, as if confirming it for herself. She looked at the data stream. Weapons are cold. Engines are at low power. They are following the protocol. Lee Dae-hyun let out a long, shuddering sigh and leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. I need to shut down the dispersal grid before the emitters melt. That last shot from the dreadnoughts pushed them to the edge. Choi Hai-jin removed her headset, rubbing her temples. The colony is reporting all clear. Their broadcasts have stopped. They are. Celebrating. She smiled, a real tired smile. Medic Kang Min-soo began packing his open medkit. Biometrics are stabilizing. No injuries. Just adrenaline crash. I recommend everyone eat something. Captain Kim Jun remained at his podium, watching the Threxian flagship grow smaller on the screen. The battle was won, but his job was not quite done. He opened the ship-wide intercom. All hands. This is the captain. His voice echoed through the quiet corridors of the old ship. The Threxian Armada is in full retreat. The colony is secure. You have performed your duty, not just with skill, but with profound understanding. You weaponized our history and our humanity today. You should be proud. Stand down from battle stations. Get some rest. Across the ship, in the mess hall, the engineering bays, the small bunk rooms, the handful of crew members, curators, historians, retired engineers, and a few old soldiers let out the breaths they had been holding. Some hugged. Some sat down heavily and put their heads in their hands. They had not fired a single shot in anger. June turned to his bridge crew. Sumi, you have the con. Maintain a watch on their jump. I'll be in my ready room. The ready room was small, more of an oversized closet with a desk and a viewport. June sat down, the weight of the last several hours settling onto his shoulders. He looked out at the stars. After a few minutes, the door chimed. It was Park Sumi, Captain. The Threxian flagship is hailing us. Admiral Kale requests a final audience. Visual this time. June considered it. Then he nodded. Put him through on the screen here. The monitor on his wall flickered to life. Admiral Kale's insectoid face filled it. The proud, angular planes of his carapace seemed to sag. His multifaceted eyes held no defiance, only a deep, exhausted confusion. Captain Kim June, Kale began, his buzzing voice softer. My fleet is preparing its jump. We will honor the terms. I never doubted you would, June replied. A silence stretched between them. Kale finally broke it. I must know. What is your ship? Is it truly the unyielding from Helios? June offered a small, weary smile. The original unyielding was vaporized in the heart of your dreadnought, Admiral. This vessel is its sister, laid down in the same shipyard, from the same plans. It was a training vessel, then a museum ship for almost a century. We restored it, not to its original specs, but to an idea. An idea? The idea that some weapons are too valuable to use only once, June said. The Battle of Helios gave us a weapon more powerful than any missile, the memory of Threxian fear. We built this ship to carry that memory. Its shields are experimental, yes. Its systems are updated. But its true armament is its name and the story that comes with it. You did not fight a warship today, Admiral. You fought a monument, and you tried to shoot down a ghost. On the screen, Kale seemed to shrink. The truth was more demeaning than any technological secret. He had been defeated by a symbol. And your crew? They are not soldiers. They are archivists, engineers, diplomats, a medic, June said. They are people who believe remembering is just as important as building. They believe that sometimes the best way to win a war is to remind the enemy why they should never have started it. Kale looked away from the screen for a moment, as if checking his own bridge. When he looked back, there was a grim acceptance in his posture. You weaponized your past. No, June corrected gently. We honored it. And in doing so, we protected our future. And yours. Your ships are returning home, Admiral. Your crews will see their families. That is a better victory for both of us than a graveyard around this world. There was nothing more to say. Kale gave a slow, formal nod of his head, a Threxian gesture of respect to a worthy opponent. Until the diplomats speak, Captain. Until then. Safe journey, Admiral. The screen went dark. Kim June sat back. He thought of the original crew of the Unyielding, who had made the ultimate sacrifice to buy their people time. He hoped, in some way, this was a worthy repayment using their legacy, not to destroy another fleet, but to save one and the innocent lives below. He returned to the bridge. The crew was at their stations, but the atmosphere was relaxed. On the viewer, A brilliant flash of light signaled the void's will, launching into faster-than-light travel. One by one, across the dark, the Threxian ships flashed and vanished, until only the steady, friendly stars remained. "Threxian Armada has cleared the system," Sumi reported. "Set a course for home," Captain Kim Jun said. "Slow and steady. Let's go tell everyone that the story still works." The unyielding, its duty done, turned its scarred and ancient hull toward the inner systems. It moved not with the arrogant speed of a conqueror, but with the quiet, assured pace of a teacher returning from a difficult lesson. Behind it, the colony world spun on, bathed in sunlight, its people unaware of the ghost that had stood between them and the night.